After an unexpected journey, Xiaolian found herself not only holding the script, but also carrying supermarket space. The items in the supermarket will automatically recover after midnight after being used. Can't use flint to start a fire. It's okay, she has a lighter. Brown rice and coarse grains make my throat sore. It's okay, she has enough space for rice, white noodles, fresh vegetables, and frozen meat. With inexhaustible resources, Xiaolian opened a mysterious grocery store in ancient times. A certain man. 100 bottles of wine. 100 bottles of beer and 100 bottles of juice. Sorry, there isn't that much. Our supermarket has a daily limited supply. What's wrong with the cannon fodder female supporting role? With supermarket space, if the male and female protagonists want to eat spicy noodles or drink coffee, it all depends on her mood. Having inexhaustible resources and mastering the bugs of the male and female protagonists is simply ridiculous. Keywords of the novel. Unlimited supplies. With Space Supermarket, Defender of Rights, no pop-ups, unlimited supplies. With Space Supermarket, Defender of Rights, TXT Complete Collection Download, unlimited supplies. With Space Supermarket, Defender of Rights, latest chapters read. Chapter 1. Crossing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Crossing. The breeze is not dry, the sunshine is just right. During the May Day holiday, my parents went on a trip together, leaving Xiaolian alone to look at the supermarket. Her supermarket is located in the town and is the largest supermarket in their town. The two-story building in the backyard of the supermarket is her home. In her mother's words, not to mention being the richest person in town, her family is almost there. Just work hard for a few more years. Supermarkets are not very crowded except during busy market days. After finally taking a statutory holiday, Xiaolian was forced to help her parents take care of the supermarket, and she was not happy at all. Do you two really enjoy traveling? Will your conscience not hurt? Perhaps due to the hot weather, there were very few guests at noon. She opened a bag of potato chips and ate them while bored with reading novels on her mobile app. Xiaolian. Xiaolian. She was lost in thought when suddenly a distant and hollow call came to her ear. Hey, who's calling me? Xiaolian stood up with potato chips rubbing against her, stretched her neck towards the store entrance, glanced at her, and muttered to herself, there's no one around either. She was about to sit back and continue reading novels, but she felt very dizzy and her eyes were a bit blurred. She almost couldn't stand up and said, oh no, did low blood sugar happen again? She was about to go to the shelf and find a piece of fruit candy to contain, but as soon as she took a step, she felt a soft sensation under her feet and fell straight to the ground. Alright, I'll call the soul back for you. Great, thank you, and how? My little Lian will be fine, won't she? Now that the fever has subsided and my breathing is normal, I should be able to wake up in a while. Well. We are all from the same village, and you are also facing difficulties. Just give me 15 won. You know, if people from other villages come to me, they won't negotiate for 31. Xiaolian vaguely heard someone saying strange things in her ear and wanted to open her eyes, but she felt her eyelids darken and fell asleep again. When she woke up again, she was awakened by a loud noise. If this little nemesis dies, she will die. Surprisingly, she still spends money on medical treatment. If you can't spend all your money, why don't you show filial piety to your mother and me? Mom, Xiaolian is also my daughter. She has a high fever that doesn't subside. I can't just watch her die, can I? Changhe, your son has long been dead. You picked up this dead girl, she's not your own. You figure it out. I'm your own mother. That broom star was picked up. Old lady, you pointed at her second son with an angry expression on her face. Seeing Changhe bowing his head in silence, she continued, it's not that my mother doesn't allow her. How could there be a child who freezes all night in the snow in the winter and can't even die from it? Her eyes are grayish and different from us normal people. She's just a fairy. Why are you so disobedient to your mother? Xiaolian frowned and listened to the noise outside, feeling a wave of unfamiliarity. Looking down at herself again, her hands were small, her feet were small, and her whole body was small. She panicked and touched her whole body up and down. How did she become so small? He is still wearing clothes that have been washed white and covered in patches. Did she travel through time? Otherwise, why would she become a child and be in this dilapidated house? Only this reason can explain it. Xiaolian stood up from the Kong, turned around, and looked at the room. There is black ash hanging on the thatched roof, and the walls are mud walls. You can clearly see the yellow grass on the walls. In addition to a simple carved Kong cabinet on the Kong, there are also two large wooden boxes on the ground. There is a small bamboo basket on top of the wooden box, containing some wild fruits. The soil on the ground has been swept clean, and a little water has been sprinkled on top. The quilts on the Kong are neatly stacked at the corner of the Kong, and the bamboo mat on the Kong is also extremely clean. There are a few exposed areas that are also tightly sewn with a few pieces of cloth, indicating that the female owner of the room is an extremely clean person. Xiaolian glanced at the ground and saw a pair of small cloth shoes with a hole but a patch on them. I believe these are the shoes of the original owner. The noise outside didn't stop, and Xiaolian planned to go out and take a look. As soon as she put on those shoes, it was like opening a floodgate of memory, and the memories of the original owner surged in like a floodgate. Xiaolian supported the edge of the Kong and digested it inside the room. After receiving all the memories of the original owner, she was dumbfounded. She actually wore a book, wearing the same novel she was reading just now. This original owner, like her, is also called Xiaolian, but in the book, Xiaolian is a cannon fodder supporting actress. Oh my goodness, how could she travel inexplicably? I don't know how her modern body is doing, is she still here? Suddenly, she thought of the soul-calling voice from last night. She vaguely remembered that it was the goddess named Anthao who brought her into this world. No, she needs to go find that godmother and find a way to send her back. Xiaolian pushed the door open and the noise outside suddenly stopped. Several pairs of eyes were fixed on her, and she swallowed her saliva and said, "Can I go find Grandma How?" Old lady, you gave her a fierce glare and said angrily, "What's wrong? Spending 15 yuan is not enough. Do you still want to send her some more money?" How Shinpa is usually not very skilled, so Mrs. Yu didn't stop her from doing things for Xiaolian yesterday. Anyway, since people can't be saved, she won't give money. What she didn't expect was that this incompetent How Shinpa really saved Xiaolian, who was suffering from a high fever and on the brink of death. It's really strange. Although Xiaolian is the soul of the 21st century, she has always been a quiet girl and has never really fought with anyone else. At this moment, Mrs. Yu looked at her so fiercely that she couldn't help but feel timid. I just wanted to thank her. She said she can't stand in front of Mrs. Yu and say that I want that godmother to send me back to modern times. Old Lady Yu's eyes turned pale as she said, if you want to thank him, thank your father. He has hired both a doctor and a godmother for your illness, and he owes a lot of money. He can't live these days anymore. Xiaolian looked at Changhe, who was leaning on a wooden stick and had a limp leg, and said fiercely, Dad. Thank you. Changhe nodded slightly and then looked at his wife Sun. Sure, take Xiaolian back to the house. Sun brought Xiaolian back to the house, and the noise outside began again. Xiaolian listened attentively. Mrs. Yu actually mentioned parting ways, and Sun heard it. She glanced at Xiaolian and said, don't go out of the house, Mom, go out and take a look. Xiaolian nodded. After Sun left, Xiaolian immediately pressed her ear to the window. It's not certain whether she can go back. Since she's here all day, we need to understand the actual situation. Be a monk for a day, hit the clock for a day. Since you became lame and couldn't go to town to earn money, your family has lost a share of their income. The dozen or so acres of land in your family are all supported by your father and big brother. Your younger brother hasn't married a wife yet. The girl from the Qi family who went on a blind date with your younger brother said that if you want her to marry, your family of 3 will have already left. I was originally thinking of discussing with their family again, but yesterday you brought out so many famines, I can't care about you anymore. Seeing that Xiaojiang was silent, old lady Yu continued, I discussed this matter with your father and your elder brother last night, and they all agreed to split the family. However, you can't give your land, so you can plant the wasteland in the southwest corner. New book, Seeking Collection, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Little Enemies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Little Enemies. Xiaojiang leaned on his wooden stick and held it tightly, wanting to open his mouth and say something, but then he swallowed it again. Mrs. Yu said again, after separation, you will have to take care of the famine you owe yourself. Then, just give me and your father 51 of retirement money every month. After all, since you have been limping, we have also raised your family of 3 for several months in vain. Son couldn't bear to watch on the side and said, Mother, you have to speak with conscience. What does it mean to have been raising us for several months in vain? Xiaojiang can't do heavy work anymore, but I don't do any less work at home or outside. When Xiaojiang used to work as a yamen keeper in the town, he would hand over 2 taels of silver per month to you. Now, when we split the family, we don't give land or money, which is too unfair to us, right? Old lady Yu saw that son dared to argue with her, so she immediately said with a cold face, didn't you say that the piece of land in the southwest corner was given to you? As for giving you the first-class land, it's also in vain. He can't plant it as a cripple. After giving it to you, won't it end up in the hands of your maternal brothers? Son was infuriated by Mrs. Yu's words. It seems that the Yu family really doesn't intend to have Xiaojiang as their son. Son was so angry that he couldn't speak. Xiaojiang grabbed his wife's wrist and looked at Mrs. Yu, saying, since you dislike me for being a burden on this family, you can still divide it. You just need to bring the village chief over and let him divide the family. I won't say anything about how he divides the family. Mrs. Yu exclaimed, what are you looking for him for? I know exactly how many things and land there are in this family. I'll just divide them up. Xiaojiang said coldly, if the village chief doesn't come, I don't care about this family. Dad Yu, who had been squatting under the wall smoking a bag of cigarettes, listened to his second son's words and knocked the tobacco pot against the earthen wall. After knocking off the cigarette ash, he stood up and said, I'll go find the village chief. After Yu's father left, Yu Changfu walked over to Xiaojiang thoughtfully. He sighed first, then patted Xiaojiang's shoulder and said earnestly, second, you're too foolish to keep that little nemesis. You said since you picked her up, Guangguer died in less than 2 years. Now your leg is also limp, and our parent Yu did not get into the scholar exam. Now that she and her parents have separated, it's all her fault. Xiaojiang expressionlessly took Changfu's hand off his shoulder and said, this has nothing to do with Lianer. Old Yu quickly summoned the village chief, and under his leadership, Xiaojiang was officially separated. Unlike before, he was given an extra acre of first-class land and 200 kilograms of rice and 50 kilograms of sorghum, as well as a bag of corn flour. As for where they live, their family of 3 still live in the same house. Mrs. Yu also divided several bowls and agricultural tools for Xiaojiang, but they were all the most worn out. As for the kitchen, old lady Yu asked Xiaojiang to build his own stove in the backyard. Before it was built, she allowed them to temporarily borrow the original kitchen for a period of time. However, old lady Yu specifically instructed her eldest daughter-in-law, Chao Shi, to buy things such as oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar in the town, and son Shi was not allowed to borrow them. Xiaojiang asked son to bring the divided items into the room. Son lifted the items and looked at Xiaolian with tears in her eyes. Her eyes were filled with resentment, and Yu Xiaolian could see it clearly. When Yu Changhe picked up Yu Xiaolian, he was still working as a yamen guard in the town, earning 2 taels of silver per month. Therefore, when Yu Changhe wanted to adopt Yu Xiaolian, the entire Yu family did not object much. But when Yu Xiaolian was 2 years old, Yu Ziquang, the son of Yu Changhe and the Sun family, passed away due to illness, high fever, and convulsions. Because Yu Xiaolian's eyes are 1/3 gray, they are considered ominous by the villagers. Later, some people in the village began spreading rumors that it was Yu Xiaolian who killed Yu Changhe's biological son. At first, Sun didn't pay much attention to these rumors, and remained as kind to Yu Xiaolian as ever. Later on, as these rumors grew more and more, Sun began to feel uneasy about Yu Xiaolian. However, Sun only used cold violence against her and never physically assaulted her. A few months ago, Yu Changhe offended the young master of the town bully Pan family, Pan Jinrong, and was sent by Pan Jinrong to have his leg broken. From then on, Yu Changhe lost his job and limped one more leg, making the Yu family suddenly financially disadvantaged. Sun Shi also became increasingly dissatisfied with Yu Xiaolian. For so many years, Sun has never been pregnant again, and the villagers have also accused Yu Xiaolian of causing trouble. They just want to send Yu Xiaolian away. Alas, Yu Xiaolian is a small nemesis that everyone fears in this village. Sun carefully stacked the several bags of grain he had distributed in a corner of the room, with wooden boards underneath to prevent the rice from getting damp. Yu Changhe came into the house carrying a string of copper coins. The 501 that should have been given to them, but old lady Yu only gave them 451. Old lady Yu deducted the 51 pension money for next month in advance. Yu Changhe handed the copper coins strung with thin ropes to Sun Shi and said, "Put them away." Sun took the string of copper coins with tears in her eyes and said, "I didn't expect my mother to be so heartless. Although we used to rely on you to support our whole family, now I see that you are lame and can't make any money, so I'll divide our family." Yu Changhe didn't respond to Sun's words, just reached out and called for Yu Xiaolian to come over. Then he touched Yu Xiaolian's forehead and saw that she was no longer suffering from a high fever. Only then did he show a smile, but the smile didn't reach the bottom of his eyes. Yu Xiaolian's mood at this moment is extremely complex, because she knows that the fate of everyone in the Yu family, including herself, is extremely tragic. Yu Changhe looked at Sun Shi and said, "It's almost noon. Can you make some food for Xiaolian?" Sun paused as she tidied up her things and said, "Mom and the others are using the kitchen. Let's wait a moment." Yu Xiaolian tentatively spoke up, "Dad, can I go out and play?" Yu Changhe glanced at Yu Xiaolian and said, "You've been suffering from a high fever for the past few days, and it's not easy for you to recover. You can't go out for a breeze yet. Be good and play inside." Yu Xiaolian frowned and refused to let her go out. How could she have the chance to find that godmother? She is afraid that if the delay is too long, she will never be able to return to her original world. Yu Changhe carried Yu Xiaolian onto the kong and placed the bamboo basket from the wooden box on her lap. "Let's eat some wild fruits to cushion her stomach," he said. Although Yu Xiaolian was already 10 years old at the time, her body was very thin and weak. She looked much younger than her peers. She glanced at the bamboo basket handed to her by Yu Changhe, which contained a few wild apricots and a few wild pears that had just turned a little red. Yu Xiaolian just glanced at these wild fruits, and her mouth was already starting to sour. However, Yu Changhe was staring at her at the moment, and she had to grit her head and take a bite of the hard pear. To Yu Xiaolian's surprise, this pear is not only not sour, but also slightly sweet, except for the lack of flesh, too much hard residue, and a bad taste. Yu Xiaolian only took one bite and didn't want to take a second one. For some reason, she felt a strong sense of fullness at this moment, and also thought that she might live in this world for a long time in the future, feeling a bit sad and depressed, and had no mood to eat. "I'll go out and ask my elder brother to help build a stove in the backyard." Yu Changhe lifted the door curtain and dragged his limp as he walked out. Sun picked up half a bag of rice and glanced at Xiaolian. I'll go to the east end of the village to grind rice. Don't run around at home yourself. Xiaolian nodded, as she could tell from Sun's expression that he was unhappy with her. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Supermarket Space. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Supermarket Space. Xiaolian leaned over the window and looked into the courtyard. The courtyard was empty, and the Yu family had all gone into the house to eat. It was the best time for her to secretly find Xiaojiang. Xiaolian put on those small cloth shoes and the cat slipped out of the courtyard of the Yu family. According to the original owner's memory, Xiaojiang's family lived at the west end of the village, near the foot of the mountain, which was easy to find because there were only two households there. One was the Jiang hunter's family and the other was Xiaojiang's family. Xiaolian often goes to the mountains to dig wild vegetables and always passes by, so she easily finds Xiaojiang's family. Xiaolian seemed quite surprised when she saw her coming. Xiaolian pondered for a moment before speaking up. Xiaolian, if you're called the wrong soul, can you still send it back? Xiaojiang reached out and touched Xiaolian's forehead. Is this child suffering from a high fever? He's so feverish. What nonsense is he talking about? Xiaolian nervously swallowed her saliva, feeling very uneasy in her heart. Just. If I call the wrong soul, can I still send it back? Seeing Xiaolian repeating her expression seriously, Xiaojiang's face changed and she picked up Xiaolian's hand before entering the room. You go up to the Kong and lie down. Xiaolian obediently lay down, feeling a sense of happiness in her heart. It was great, she should be able to go back now. Xiaojiang took a handful of coarse incense, but Xiaolian didn't see how she lit it. The incense seemed to ignite without any fire. Xiaojiang swiped the incense back and forth on Xiaolian's body a few times, muttering some incantations that Xiaolian didn't understand. The strong and inferior fragrance made Xiaolian unable to open her eyes, and she had to close them. Slowly, Xiaolian felt as if she was tired, and when she opened her eyes, she was in her own supermarket. I'm back. Xiaolian jumped up happily. She couldn't wait to open the door and go out to find her parents, but the glass door seemed to be against her and couldn't be opened. Xiaolian was extremely anxious and used all her strength to pull the glass door, but it remained motionless. Xiaolian. Xiaolian. Xiaolian heard Xiaojiang calling her again, and this time she didn't dare to respond casually. She didn't want to go back. Although she found time travel quite enjoyable while reading, the thought of living a life without a phone or computer in the future made Xiaolian feel uncomfortable. As long as she doesn't agree, I believe Xiaojiang can't call her back anymore. But everything could not be done by her. Xiaolian opened her eyes again and saw Xiaojiang with grey temples. Xiaojiang looked at her nervously, as if she was making a silent inquiry. Why did you call me back again? Xiaolian burst out. Xiaojiang shook her right hand and the burnt incense fell onto the Kong. I want to go back. Xiaolian collapsed and shouted. The next second, Xiaolian unexpectedly appeared in her own supermarket again. She was overjoyed and tried to open the door again, only to find that it still couldn't be opened. Suddenly, Xiaolian felt a pang of pain in her fingertips. It turned out that Xiaojiang had stabbed her finger with a needle after seeing that she hadn't woken up for a long time. Child, my mother-in-law has done her best. No matter who you used to be, you can only be Xiaolian in the future. In the end, it's my mother-in-law who apologized to you. Don't worry, I will keep the secret for you. Xiaolian's expression was disheartened. She knew she would never go back to her original home again, so she left Xiaojiang's house dejected. Oh, isn't that a little nemesis? Isn't she suffering from a high fever that doesn't subside? Why hasn't she died yet? Quick! Let's take a detour and stay away from her. A few little girls were carrying baskets made of willows and planning to go to the mountains to dig wild vegetables together. When they met Xiaolian with a dejected expression, they whispered and avoided her. Xiaolian looked up and saw that among the few little girls, she knew one named Xiaolian. The others were just familiar to her, but she didn't know their names. Xiaolian is also the only girl of the same age who is not afraid of her, but she is not afraid. Her family is afraid, and when they heard that Xiaolian and Xiaolian were getting closer, Xiaolian's family beat her up hard. Therefore, Xiaolian no longer dares to talk to Xiaolian. When Xiaolian returned to the Yu family, Sun Shi happened to be carrying the ground rice from outside. When she saw Xiaolian coming back from outside, she didn't ask, just lowered her face and went inside to put the rice away, then scooped a bowl of rice and went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Chao Shi, the wife of Yu Changfu, was washing dishes. When Sun Shi came in, she immediately threw the dishes out of the pot and said, "If you want to use the pot, wash the dishes." Without saying a word, Sun took the bowl from Chao's hand and began to brush it. Chao Shi said with a proud expression, "I've never seen your family leader so foolish. I don't want my own child, I have to raise someone else's child, and I'm still very enthusiastic about it." Sun just brushed the bowl in his hand and remained silent. Chao glanced at the bowl of rice brought by Sun and said, "Aren't you cooking today?" Mom said, "Let me watch over you and not let you use our oil and salt." Sun Shi brushed out the plates and bowls in the pot after a few times, and then began to brush the pot. "Don't worry, sister.in.law, I'll use the pot to cook some congee." Chao Shi leaned against the door frame and said, "It takes a lot of water to cook congee. When you finish cooking congee, don't forget to fill the water tank. His second uncle is lame and can't carry water, so you have to work hard." Sun's hand brushing the pot paused and then said coldly, "Sister-in-law, let's go out, otherwise the washing water will splash onto you later." Speaking of the brush in Sun's hand, he swung it fiercely towards Chao's side. Although the clothes on Chao's body were not of good material, she didn't want to get them dirty. She took several steps back and gave a scolding to Sun before leaving. Xiaolian returned to the room, still thinking about what had happened in the supermarket just now. Is she really unable to go back? For some reason, Xiaolian unexpectedly appeared in her own supermarket again. This time, she still immediately went to pull the glass door of the convenience store, but still couldn't. She walked to the cashier again, and the half bag of potato chips she had eaten and the novel she had read on her phone were still placed there as they were. She tried to pick up the half bag of potato chips, but surprisingly picked it up. I took a bite and it was the same as usual. She had heard before that for a period of time after death, the soul would be trapped in the place of death, repeating the moment of death repeatedly. But at this moment, everything in this supermarket seems to have come to a standstill. All of this should be an illusion. Xiaolian tossed and turned in her heart a few times and found that she could shuttle back and forth between ancient times and supermarkets. Moreover, the things in the supermarket would appear in her hands with just a thought, and modern things could even be brought back to ancient times. This discovery made Xiaolian's uncomfortable mood much better. Xiaolian thought to herself that she couldn't go back anyway. She resigned and came to the kitchen, intending to help Sun start a fire. "Mom. Should I start a fire?" End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Adoptive Mother-Son. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Adoptive Mother-Son. Sun Shi looked up at Xiaolian and said, "Come on, then I'll go to the well edge to fetch water. There is congee in the pot, just boil it, don't burn too much." After Sun finished explaining, he picked up a pole and 2 buckets and went out. Xiaolian looked at the 2 flints on the stove and struck them a few times according to the original owner's memory, causing pain in her hands and not igniting the fire. Is this flint ignition still a technical job? Xiaolian didn't believe in evil and continued to try a few more times. In the end, her hand hurt when she knocked, but she didn't ignite the fire. Ah, if only I had a lighter. Just as Xiaolian finished sighing, a red lighter appeared in her hand. She suddenly realized that as long as she thought so in her heart, things from the convenience store would appear in her hands. Xiaolian was overjoyed. As soon as he arrived, he settled in. Xiaolian used a lighter to guide the firewood under the stove, and after boiling the pot, he swept away the broken firewood. At this moment, Sun also brought back 2 buckets of water. As soon as Sun poured the 2 buckets into the large water tank, Xiao walked over and said, "Sisters, this tank is not full either." However, Sun placed the pole on the wall and had no intention of picking it again. "Since we have separated, if we use it ourselves, we can pick it ourselves. I just cooked a little congee and picked up 2 buckets of water. How can you take advantage of it?" Upon hearing Sun's words, Xiao immediately changed her face. If Sun didn't fill the water tank, her mother-in-law would instruct her to pick it. She didn't want to go that far to fetch water. "Is this the tank used to hold water from our house? We lent you the tank, so you have to fill it up. You can't just waste our water tank, can you?" Sun put the 2 buckets back in their original place and glanced at Xiao. "Since sister-in-law has calculated so clearly, let's do a good job of accounting. When Changhe was working as a yamen official in the town, your mother's father was sick, but he borrowed 1 or 2 silver from me and hasn't returned it to me yet. Also, the money for repairing Zishu and Zi's school has always been from Changhe. When do you plan to repay it? If you don't have money, you can use it to cover the account." Sun's words were sharp and well-founded. Xiao was stunned for a moment, but she was not a soft persimmon either. She immediately replied loudly, "At that time, we had not yet separated our families. The money was given by Changhe's mother. If you have the ability, you can take care of your mother and go." When it comes to Mrs. Yu, Sun is even more infuriated. Over the years, all the money earned by Yu Changhe and Yu Changfu has been handed over to Mrs. Yu, and the annual harvest of the family's farming is also held in Mrs. Yu's hands. How could she have no money? Thinking of only receiving 451 from the family separation, Sun felt a wave of frustration. But at this moment, she didn't dare to get into a quarrel with Mrs. Yu. Once the quarrel broke out, Mrs. Yu would definitely drive them out and there would be no place to live. When Xiao saw her mention old lady Yu, Sun remained silent and felt a little proud. "It's like your mother and brother haven't spent a long river of silver. If you want me to tell you, I don't know how much money you've been carrying on your back to your mother's house these years. Fortunately, you're asking me for money. I think we should go to your mother's house to ask for money." Upon hearing Xiao's words, Sun became extremely angry and grabbed the pole at the bottom of the wall, shouting at Xiao, "You dare to go. If you dare to trouble my mother, I dare to trouble Zishu's school and make it impossible for both of your sons to attend school." Sun's words can be considered as gripping Xiao's dead end. Xiao turned around and ran towards the backyard, shouting as he walked, "Yu Changfu! Yu Changfu! So what's going on?" Yu Changfu frowned as he saw Xiao's face drooping and said, "I just finished making the mud with Changhe. What do you want me to do?" "What are you doing?" "We've already split up, so we have to take care of ourselves. I twisted my waist while washing dishes just now. Hurry up and go to the well to fetch water. Otherwise, when my mother sees that the water tank is not full, she should curse again." As Xiao spoke, he went to forcefully pull Yu Changfu's arm. Yu Changfu turned around and glanced at Yu Changhe, who immediately said, "Big brother, go ahead and get busy. I'll take care of the rest myself." Xiao gave birth to 2 sons to Yu Changfu. His eldest son, Yu Zishu, is on the 15th of this year, and his second son, Yu Zi, is on the 11th of this year. Due to the fact that the Qiao family gave birth to 2 sons for him, Yu Changfu is still very kind to the Qiao family in his daily life, and some small matters also follow the temperament of the Qiao family. Yu Zishu and Yu Zi are the only 2 grandsons of the Yu family, naturally receiving unconditional favor from all members of the Yu family. Among them, the eldest son, Yu Zishu, has a great talent for reading and often receives praise from the school teacher, as well as being highly valued by old lady Yu. Although the second son, Yu appeared smarter and more intelligent, he refused to put his mind into studying. A few days ago, he even made a request not to go to school again. Now the wealth of the Yu family is not as generous as before, supporting their 2 grandchildren to go to school. They are about to marry Xiaojiang, so when Yu proposed not to go to school, old lady Yu immediately agreed. However, the bundle repairs for this quarter have already been paid, and even if you don't go to school, you won't be able to get a refund. So, Mrs. Yu asked Yu to drop out of school until autumn. Sun Shi put kanji in a basin and said to Xiaolian, "Go to the backyard and ask your father to come back for dinner." Xiaolian walked to the backyard and saw that the wooden stick that Xiaojiang usually relied on was thrown aside. Xiaojiang was kneeling on the ground to demold the mud embryo, but due to his limited mobility, his legs were covered in mud. Watching the Xiaojiang like this, Xiaolian felt very uncomfortable in her heart. "Dad, it's time for dinner." Xiaolian walked over, helped Xiaojiang up, and handed him the wooden stick he usually relied on. "Liener, are you hungry? You go eat first, don't worry about me. Dad needs to go wash up first, otherwise your mother won't let you in." Xiaojiang smiled. Xiaojiang really said nothing to her daughter whom he had picked up. You should know that at this time, the idea of valuing sons over daughters is very serious. Who would pick up a daughter for no reason and come back to raise her? At this time, grain is very expensive, and no one wants to have an extra mouth for nothing. Moreover, the growing conflict between Sun and Xiaojiang is also due to her. Perhaps it can give Sun a child of her own, so that she can truly be happy, right? However, she remembered that Xiaojiang died when Xiaolian was 12 years old and did not leave any offspring. I don't know if her arrival can change the original fate trajectory of Xiaojiang. Sun Shi filled everyone with a bowl of kanji, which was very thin. "We need to save some food, otherwise winter won't be easy," explained Sunday. On the land that Mrs. Yu gave them, there were still crops growing, but the food grown on that land will belong to Mrs. Yu when it is harvested in autumn. So, Mrs. Yu gave them over 200 kilograms of grain, and they had to eat until next autumn. It was said to be 200 kilograms of grain, but old lady Yu gave her 200 kilograms of rice with rice husks. After grinding away the husks, there would be over 100 kilograms left. How could it be possible to eat it until next autumn? According to Sun, these grains will persist through this winter, and by next spring, they will be able to eat wild vegetables to eat their fill. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Descendants of the Wu clan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Descendants of the Wu clan. Xiaolian drank a bowl of porridge, put down his chopsticks, said it was a bowl of kanji, but it was actually a bowl of rice soup. Sun glanced at her and said calmly, "Eat more, there's no more dinner that night." Xiaolian nodded and said, "Mom, I'm full." Sun poured the rice soup from the bowl into his own bowl, and the remaining dry food into the bowl of Xiaojiang. "How's the stove doing?" "The mud embryo has been prepared. It will be sunny all day today and can be laid tomorrow morning. I guarantee it will be finished in the afternoon. Tomorrow, you can go to the town and buy the pot. Just put it up." Xiaojiang wanted to give some rice porridge to the Sun family, but the Sun family took a bowl and dodged. "You eat more, I'm not hungry." After Sun finished speaking, he drank the rice soup from the bowl in one gulp and said, "Since my mother said the crops in the field won't belong to us, I won't go to the field to help after their autumn harvest. Tomorrow, I will go to the town to buy a pot and bring back some embroidery thread." Xiaojiang knew that Sun intended to do some embroidery work to earn money. Sun's embroidery skills were very good, but embroidery was very tiring for the eyes and the wages he gave were also small. If Xiaojiang had previously disagreed with Sun's exhaustion, but now he doesn't seem to have the qualification to say you don't do it. Xiaolian looked at Sun Shi and said, "Mother, I'll go with you tomorrow. I can help you with your things." After thinking for a moment, Sun nodded and said, "We just separated, and our family is indeed short of a lot of things, but we don't have enough money in our hands. Although it's not enough to buy everything, I definitely can't get it back alone. You can go with us." When lying under the bed at night, Xiaolian thought about the affairs of the Yu family in her mind and began to calculate in her heart. Xiaolian in the book is a descendant of a leader of the witch tribe, but she never knew her true identity until her death. After the inexplicable death of Changhe, Xiaolian was sold by old lady Yu. The buyer is the male protagonist Prince Huainan. Jun Mabai. Jun Mabai has been searching for the whereabouts of the mysterious witch tribe member in order to cure his beloved Yu Yanran's coldness. Legend has it that the people of the Wu tribe are not afraid of cold or poison because their blood is different from that of ordinary people. There are rumors that pure blood from the descendants of the witch race can detoxify 100 poisons. Jun Mabai sent someone to secretly kill Yu Changhe in order to successfully buy Yu Xiaolian, because he knew that as long as Yu Changhe died, no one would protect Yu Xiaolian anymore. In the later stage, Jun Mabai took Yu Xiaolian as his concubine in order to make her willingly become Yu Yanran's antidote for a long time. It also gave Yu Xiaolian, this poor little girl, the coveted glory and wealth. After Yu Xiaolian gained power, how could she let go of the Yu family who had bullied her? Except for Sun, who was already half crazy and half foolish, and was mercifully sent to the nunnery by Yu Xiaolian, the fate of everyone else in the Yu family was extremely tragic. Although he was a concubine, Jun Mabai had no intention of spoiling Yu Xiaolian. The purpose of Yu Xiaolian's existence was to give Yu Yanran a bowl of warm blood when she had a cold attack. Yu Xiaolian's blood is not as good as Jun Mabai thought, it can cure Yu Yanran's coldness, but it does have a relieving effect. For the sake of Yu Yanran's illness, Jun Mabai had to endure Yu Xiaolian's entanglement and threats for a long time. Later, when Yu Xiaolian forced him to die, Jun Mabai was forced to favor Yu Xiaolian. Having been a concubine for a long time and getting used to Jun Mabai's countless indulgences towards Yu Yanran, Yu Xiaolian began to hate Jun Mabai for his love. But she couldn't bear to harm Jun Mabai, so she secretly added severe poison to the antidote for Yu Yanran, causing Yu Yanran to vomit blood and his life hanging on the line. Later on, it became very dramatic. Yu Yanran's chills were miraculously cured due to the poison inflicted by Yu Xiaolian. The female protagonist Yu Yanran is ready, and the cannon fodder supporting actress will naturally receive a boxed meal. But because her blood has a special ability to detoxify, Jun Mabai doesn't want to waste such a good antidote. So, Yu Xiaolian in the book died from being drained of blood by Jun Mabai. After the death of Yu Xiaolian, her extremely powerful wizard father made a brilliant appearance to avenge her daughter, but it was impossible for these already dead Yu Xiaolian to know. That novel, Yu Xiaolian saw it here and didn't see the ending. But I also want to know that Jun Mabai and Yu Yanran, blessed by the protagonist's aura, will definitely not die. The unlucky one should be the witch father of Yu Xiaolian, who is determined to seek revenge for his daughter. Yu Xiaolian lay at the top of the Kong, while Yu Changhe and Sun Shi lay at the head of the Kong, separated by a floral cloth curtain hanging between them. At this moment, Yu Xiaolian is not at all sleepy. Jun Mabai is the crown prince of Huainan, rich and powerful. It is easy to kill Yu Changhe. How can she protect Yu Changhe from death in 2 years? Suddenly, a person's name flashed through Yu Xiaolian's mind. Jun Ian. Yu Xiaolian smiled slightly. It seems that when she had to start from him. The next day, in order not to conflict with Chao's breakfast making time, Sun Shi prepared breakfast early, which was still rice porridge with little water. After the 3 men had drunk porridge, the Sun family dug out the string of copper coins from the Kong cabinet and put them in a cloth bag. They told Yu Xiaolian to carry a small bamboo basket, and their mother and daughter set out. The village where the Yu family is located is called Huanzi, which is not far from the town. After crossing the bridge and walking for more than 10 minutes, they arrived at the town. Although Yu Xiaolian is 10 years old, it is still her first time in town. At this moment, the sun had not yet fully risen and the sky was still gray, with people already coming and going in the town. At this time, most people in the market were bartering, and they were accustomed to working at sunrise and resting at sunset. Sun took Xiaolian's hand and walked through the noisy market to a silk shop. It is estimated that Sun had done embroidery work for this shop before. As soon as Sun entered, the landlady of the silk shop recognized Sun and praised her for the beautiful style and good sales of her embroidery work. Sun successfully obtained some embroidery thread, handkerchiefs to be embroidered, and sachets, carefully wrapped them, and put them into the small bamboo basket on Xiaolian's back. "Ah, this is your daughter, isn't it? This child looks strange and handsome, just these eyes." The landlady of the silk shop was about to take a closer look at Xiaolian's eyes when she was startled and suddenly lowered her head. She was too careless. Perhaps Xiaolian from her previous life was discovered by Junmobai's people like this. "Mom, my eyes seem to be lost in sand. I'll go out and wait for you." Xiaolian ran out of the door of the silk shop as if fleeing. The landlady of the silk shop didn't notice anything wrong, she just felt that Xiaolian, a rural girl, had never seen the world before. She said to Sun again, "Your girl is so old, can you handle a batch of packages?" Coincidentally, the store is going to handle a batch of packages recently. "I wonder if you two will take on this job." Sun had always wanted to earn more money, so there was no reason not to earn money when she came to her door. "Come on, we both know how much work we can do. How long can we do it?" Sun's heart naturally felt that it would be better if they could do this job for a longer period of time, because not only did they owe money to a few households in the village outside, but they also didn't have enough seed money for next spring. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Embroidery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Embroidery. When Sun came out of the silk and satin shop, Xiaolian clearly felt that Sun's mood had improved. "This landlady gave us some work to do for a month, and even confiscated the deposit." Sun happily put the things used for doing the work into Xiaolian's bamboo basket. "Is it heavy or not? How about I carry it?" Sun sure saw that Xiaolian's small bamboo basket was about to be filled, so she reached out to take it. Xiaolian shook her head and said, "No need, mother. I can carry it on my back. You'll have to carry the iron pot later. You keep your strength." Upon hearing what Xiaolian said, Sun did not persist. He took Xiaolian's hand and once again entered the market. Iron pot, 3 new sets of bowls and chopsticks, 2 medium-sized porcelain jars, 1 pound of salt and a bottle of soy sauce, and a piece of pork fat. Sun, who was familiar with the market, quickly bought them all. Finally, Sun went to the grocery store to buy lamp oil and red paper, and then took Xiaolian home. The iron pot was tied to Sun's back with a rope brought from home. She held a heavy porcelain jar in both hands, which was filled with some miscellaneous items. As for the bowls and chopsticks, Xiaolian put them in her small basket. The things on Sun's back and in her hand are probably several tens of pounds, but she still walks much faster than Xiaolian. She would quickly walk a long distance, then place the jar on the ground, pinch her waist, and wait for Xiaolian to fall behind for a while. Xiaolian really admires Sun sure. She can carry so many things and walk like a flying bird, almost catching up with the weight-bearing training of special forces. Xiaolian couldn't do it anymore. She felt the 2 ropes on her shoulders, which hurt her shoulders and forced her to place her hands under the ropes. After walking and stopping, the 2 of them finally returned to Huanzi village. As soon as they entered the village, they saw several women chatting under the big willow tree at the entrance. Some of them hold shoe soles in their hands, collecting them, while others hold embroidery sheds and are doing embroidery work. He is doing work in his hands and not idle in his mouth, talking about some recent things in the village. The biggest news in the village recently is that Xiaolian, a person who never gets sick, fell seriously ill but didn't die and came back. Another one is that Yu Jizi was singled out by his mother. Before Yu Xiaolian and son could enter, they heard them talking about his family's affairs. Alas, Yu Changhe and his family have parted ways. Why haven't they arranged to repay the money they owe me? Can I repay you now? I guess eating will be a problem in the future. I can't do it, I lent it to their family with good intentions. Their money wasn't brought by strong winds. If you want to yellow my money, that's not acceptable. I also owe my family something. When I borrowed it, I promised to repay it in a few days. How many days have passed? I think we can go to his house together to ask for money in a while. Yes, let's go together, even if he doesn't dare not refuse. Isn't that great? They are currently facing difficulties. When Changhe was a yamen runner, he did a lot of help for us. If he wants to go to you, I won't go. Anyway, my family is not in a hurry to spend money, so it's okay to delay for a while. Sun heard what they were saying from a distance. When she and Yu Xiaolian approached, she cleared her throat and said, "Aunties and sister.in.law, I just came back from the town with embroidery work. After I finish this batch of embroidery work, I will have money in my hands. I will definitely be the first to pay you back. If you have any worries, please come to my house now and ask Changhe to write an IOU for you, so you can rest assured." Although Yu Changhe hasn't read for a few years, he can still write a IOU. A few young women and old women heard Sun speak and immediately stopped their work and looked up at Sunday. Feng, a neighbor of the Yu family and a little woman who usually gets along well with the Sun family, immediately said when she saw Sun carrying a pot on her back and carrying such a heavy object in her hand, "Why are you carrying so many things? Put them down and take a break. I'm also going home. Here, I'll help you get some." Sun put down the 2 jars in his hand and gasped heavily, "Everyone is willing to lend me money because they believe in me and help me. I and Changhe both remember this feeling in their hearts. I will definitely repay the money, but it will be a few days late. If there is an urgent need, I still have dozens of one in my hand, so I can repay it first, don't worry. Don't worry. You can come back to my house whenever you have it. My family's too, you can pay back when you have it." Several women, seeing Sun's honesty, expressed that they would not go to the Yu family to demand debt. Someone asked curiously, "Just after dividing the family, there are only a few dozen one left in my hand. How much money did your mother.in.law give you?" Sun picked up 2 jars again and said, "Not much. I went to the town today and there's nothing left. We're waiting to use the pot at home, so I'll go back first." After Sun and Yu Xiaolian walked over, Feng caught up from behind and took a jar from Sun's hand, holding it in his arms. As he walked, he said, "Actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing for you and your mother.in.law to separate. I heard that your brother.in.law and daughter.in.law who didn't enter the house are not easy to get along with, they are powerful characters. Separation may be a good thing. If there are any difficulties at home, you can come to my house. My family has already instructed me to keep an eye on your house. I'm afraid you might encounter any difficulties and feel embarrassed to come knocking on your door." Feng's man's name is Zhaoque, and he and Yu Changhe have been playmates since childhood. Yu Changhe went to the town to work as a laborer, and as he grew older, he was promoted to the position of yamen attendant. Later, he also helped his son Zhaoque become a yamen attendant. Therefore, over the years, Zhaoque's relationship with Yu Changhe has been getting better and better. But wool cannot be collected on a sheep's body. He has borrowed money many times, and Yu Changhe is also embarrassed to visit the Zhao family again. Therefore, he owes some to the other families, but still owes the Zhao family the most. Sun pointed to the things on Yu Xiaolian's back, indicating that if all the embroidery work was completed, he could pay off some of the famine for the other families, but the debt owed to the Zhao family should be delayed. Feng naturally wouldn't mind Sun's refusal to repay the money. Her own man had a job of 2 taels of silver a month, but it was found by Yu Changhe. She had always wanted to find an opportunity to repay it. At the entrance of Yu's house, Yu Changhe had already waited there. First, he took down the basket from Yu Xiaolian who was walking ahead, and then he unloaded the large pot from Sun's back. Feng also placed the jar on the ground and smiled, "When you're doing embroidery work, don't forget to call me out. I'm eager to learn new patterns, let's work together, and have someone to talk to." Sun nodded and said, "Tomorrow, I will bring something and go to your house to work." Sun and Yu Changhe carried the big pot to the backyard together. Yu Changhe struggled with a limp, but none of the other members of the Yu family came out to help. In the backyard, Yu Changhe pointed to the wooden frame above the stove and said, "I need to build a shed, otherwise it will rain and I won't be able to cook. Without a shed, winter won't work either. It's too cold." After glancing at it, Sun finally built half of the shed and said, "Later, I'll build it with you. Let's put the pot on first and see if it's cooked well." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Traps. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Traps. After Yu Changhe and Sun worked together to fix the pot, they started building wooden sheds without stopping for a moment. Some of the work that Yu Changhe couldn't do was done by Sun, who jumped up and down on his own. When there was an unreachable area, Yu Changhe crouched down and let Sun step on him. Sun was also not polite, and the two of them had a very tacit understanding when working. Yu Xiaolian occasionally helps pass things around. Laying straw on top of the shed and pressing a simple windproof door panel on it, a kitchen can be considered completed. "What are you buying these 2 jars for?" Yu Changhe asked. While washing his hands, Sun Shi replied, "I can't drink congee all the time. I was thinking about drowning some pickled vegetables. Just now, wild vegetables are not old enough. Pickle 2 jars of them and you can eat them in winter." Upon hearing Sun's words, Yu Changhe felt a bit uneasy. When he made a lot of money, he handed it all over to his mother. Occasionally, he secretly gave Sun a few when behind his back, and when you found out, she would keep causing trouble. That year, on the birthday of the Sun family, Yu Changhe had just opened a monthly payment when he bought a silver hairpin for the Sun family. Due to this silver hairpin, old lady Yu caused a lot of trouble for many days and kept finding the Sun family unhappy. "Follow me and make you suffer." Sun glanced at Yu Changhe and said, "Since you know, why didn't you ask your mother for that golden ingot yesterday?" Yu Changhe lowered his head and said, "I mentioned it privately. My mother said she wants to keep it for Changyu to marry her, and asked me not to make any promises about gold in front of the village chief. If she doesn't let you mention it, then you won't mention it. You're quite obedient." Yu Changhe said again, "My mother said if I mention it, I'll drive us out to live. If you drive it out, then drive it out. That half of the gold is worth tens of taels of silver. With silver, can you still find a place to live?" This golden ingot was carried by Yu Xiaolian when Yu Changhe picked it up. It was a total of 10 taels, and if exchanged for silver, it would be 100 taels. However, Yu Changhe didn't even argue with old lady Yu. Although he was separated, he still didn't leave home. If he really broke ties with his mother and left home because of that ingot of gold, it would be considered a complete cut-off from her. He doesn't want to. Yu Changhe also knew he was in the wrong, so he lowered his head and tidied up the broken wooden boards around him, without responding to Sun's words. He still feels more towards his mother in his heart, how could Sun not be angry? Seeing Yu Changhe silent, Sun no longer paid attention to him. Instead, he adjusted his mood and began to tidy up the mud and soil in the kitchen. He also set up a few boards and placed the purchased seasoning on them. After thinking about it, I put it away again. This shed can only provide shade from the wind and is not very tight. If it rains, the seasoning will not be used. It seems that we can only put these seasonings inside the house first and bring them in every time we cook. However, according to the current conditions of his family, they can stir-fry wild vegetables to eat, and there is nothing else. As for the vegetables in the garden, Mrs. Yu does not allow them to pick and eat them casually. Xiaolian drank rice porridge with thin soup and little water in the morning, and accompanied Sun Shi to the town for a walk. At this time, the food in her stomach had already been digested. The aroma of Chow's cooking spread, and Xiaolian's stomach uncontrollably rang the bell. Xiaolian's stomach growled, and Sun naturally heard her. Go and bring some firewood over. I want to lean out the lard and try this pot. Is it well cooked? Xiaolian looked up at the sun. It was only noon. Yesterday, Sun said that they would only have 2 meals a day in the future, and they should have dinner later. Sun shouldn't have cooked so early. Xiaolian knew that Sun was someone with a sharp tongue and a heart full of tofu. She picked up an empty small basket and said, Mom, I want to eat wild vegetables today. I'll go dig some back. Can you cook later? Sun looked at Xiaolian with a surprised expression, always feeling that she was a bit different from before. The former Xiaolian had not called her Sun lady for a long time because Sun had become increasingly indifferent to her. But today, Xiaolian called her mother several times, and still used a warm and affectionate tone. Be careful, go back quickly. Don't go to the east of the forest. That area where Jiang Hunter dug many traps will be finished if he falls inside. Sun also softened her tone and took those small packets of seasoning into the house. Xiaolian, carrying a small basket and a dull digging knife, arrived at the back mountain of Huanzi. Although the back mountain is not large, it is connected by one mountain, and overall it is not small. But the people in their village are just wandering around the nearest mountain, and few are willing to go to the second mountain. It was summer now, and the water and grass were abundant. Xiaolian thought that wild vegetables should be everywhere, but he braved the scorching sun and searched at the foot of the mountain for a long time. Finally, he managed to dig up a few wild vegetables in Lingding. It seemed that the nearby wild vegetables had already been dug up by the villagers. Taking a glance at the wild vegetables in the basket, it was not enough for their family to eat 3 bites at a time. Xiaolian felt a bit embarrassed and went back like this. She looked up at the lush mountains, where she should be able to dig more. Xiaolian made up her mind and walked up the dirt road towards the mountains. After entering the dense forest, not only did the wild vegetables become more abundant, but the sun also couldn't shine on her. Xiaolian happily dug up the wild vegetables, thinking that Sun said she wanted to pickle 2 jars of pickled vegetables, and she needed to dig more back. Digging a basket full of wild vegetables by the edge of the dense forest, Xiaolian realized that she had been out for too long. She was about to carry her basket down the mountain when she caught a glimpse of a white mushroom from the corner of her eye. Xiaolian was overjoyed. This mushroom was a good thing, and if she didn't pick it back today, someone might pick it again next time. Moreover, this kind of white mushroom tastes very delicious. Without hesitation, Xiaolian poured out some wild vegetables from the basket, leaving a space for storing mushrooms. Perhaps due to the recent rain, these mushrooms have only recently emerged and have not grown too big. They are all small and difficult to pick. However, Xiaolian still dragged the small basket, picking one by one with great enthusiasm. When she heard the strange animal calls in her ear, she realized that she had been carried to the edge of the deep mountain by this mushroom. Thinking that it was not safe in the deep mountains, she didn't dare to go deeper and quickly carried the basket back. But as soon as she took a few steps back with the basket in hand, she stepped on it and fell into a hunting trap. Xiaolian fell on all fours, and the wild vegetables and mushrooms in the basket scattered all over the ground. Fortunately, there was nothing like a thorn in this pit, otherwise her life would have been entrusted here. This hunting pit was nearly 3 meters deep, and Xiaolian was a little flustered. She knew that there could be no one in the deep mountains and forests, but she had to shout for help, help. Help! Is there anyone here? After shouting for a long time, I saw the light getting darker and no one came. If this continues, it will be dark. Originally, due to the dense forest blocking, the light here was not very good. In a while, she is afraid that she will have to spend the night in this place. Yu Xiaolian found the kitchen knife and started digging a dirt ladder on the pit wall. Since no one came, she had to rely on herself. Just as she dug 2 dirt ladders, Yu Xiaolian felt the already faint light being blocked by someone. She stopped digging and looked up. There is a person above who is looking at her with their head down, but she can't see their face clearly against the light. However, no matter who came, she was saved. Help! Did you break my trap? The person's voice was cold, and Yu Xiaolian could hear the displeasure in her voice, but she still explained, I didn't mean to, I accidentally fell in. I haven't figured out what's going on in the pit with you yet, you're not willing. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Xiaojiang Hunter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Xiaojiang Hunter. Jiang Lin looked down at Yu Xiaolian with a displeased expression and said, I thought it was someone. Isn't this the little nemesis of the Yu family? After listening to his words, Yu Xiaolian smiled and said, Are you Xiaojiang Hunter's son, Xiaojiang Hunter? Can you save me first? Little Ginger Hunter. Jiang Lin frowned and said, I can help you out. How do you count if you break my trap? Yu Xiaolian was shocked and said, You set a trap and caused me to fall in. The fall made my whole body ache. I haven't even paid for your medical expenses yet. Do you still want to make a fool of yourself? Jiang Lin just handed over the rope in his hand and tied it back to his waist, grinning and saying, Medical expenses. I think you want to stay here tonight to cook dinner for the wolves, right? Sigh, there are too few people like you who think about wildlife now. Forget it, I won't stop you from feeding the tigers. You can keep staying, just pretend I haven't been here before. Before Jiang Lin could finish speaking, the shadow on Yu Xiaolian's head disappeared. In a hurry, Yu Xiaolian shouted, Hey, don't leave. I promise you all the conditions you want, but as we agreed beforehand, I don't have any money. With such a shout from Yu Xiaolian, Jiang Lin really didn't leave. He crouched down and looked at Yu Xiaolian in the trap with a teasing expression, You really agree to all the conditions? Yu Xiaolian closed her eyes and said fiercely, Tell me more. Just when Yu Xiaolian thought Jiang Lin would make some unreasonable demands, a hemp rope was thrown down and hit Yu Xiaolian's head. She looked up and saw that Jiang Lin was holding the other end of the hemp rope, looking at her with a wicked smile on his face. What are you foolishly doing? Can't get up. If I don't get up, I'll leave. Up, up. Yu Xiaolian smiled apologetically, first putting wild vegetables and mushrooms into a bamboo basket, and then tying the basket to a rope, which allowed Jiang Lin to pull it up. When Jiang Lin lowered the rope for the second time, Yu Xiaolian grabbed the rope with both hands and was forcefully dragged up by Jiang Lin. As Yu Xiaolian lay on the flat ground, panting and sighing, Jiang Lin suddenly said, Tomorrow morning I'll wait for you at the foot of the mountain. You'll use the excuse of digging vegetables to come out early. This person is really no prophet, no early rise. It's all from the same village, why did you give me a hand? Besides, you dug this trap. However, since she has promised something, Yu Xiaolian will not deny it. Yu Xiaolian held the bamboo basket in her hand and said, Thank you for rescuing me. Jiang Lin didn't even look at Yu Xiaolian and walked forward. Remember to come out early tomorrow morning, he said. Yu Xiaolian and Jiang Lin walked side by side, only to reach the foot of the mountain when they saw Yu Changhe dragging a limp leg, anxiously looking around. You're a child who worries adults too much. You shouldn't come back so late to dig wild vegetables. It's so late. How dangerous the mountain is, do you know? Fortunately, I met Jiang Lin, who kindly went to help me find you. On the way back, Yu Changhe kept scolding Yu Xiaolian, although his tone was impatient, every word showed concern. Jiang Lin. Did you ask him to go to the mountain to find me? Otherwise, who would be willing to go up the mountain so late? Yu Changhe took the basket from Yu Xiaolian's hand, felt the weight of the basket, and said again, Dig less next time. If you dig more, you won't be able to lift it. Originally, Jiang Lin knew in advance that she might have fallen into a trap, so he dared to make conditions with her. I originally planned to go and repay his personal favor tomorrow morning, but it seems unnecessary. When Yu Xiaolian and Yu Changhe returned home, it was already dark and Sun had already prepared dinner. I thought that dinner was a porridge with little water, but it was not. Sun used wild vegetables and corn flour to make vegetable dumplings, and also made a pot of wild vegetable soup, with a small plate of fragrant pig oil residue next to it. Just to wait for Yu Xiaolian to come back for dinner, the pre-made vegetable dumplings had already cooled down by now. Although on the way back, Yu Changhe had already patted the dirt on Yu Xiaolian's body, Sun sure still noticed with sharp eyes that her clothes were dirty. Yu Xiaolian saw Sun Sure staring at her clothes and quickly said, "Mom, I can wash the clothes myself. I'll go to the river to do them tomorrow morning." Sun said coldly, "Wash your hands and eat." The family was eating dinner silently, and for some reason, Yu Xiaolian didn't dare to show off the mushrooms she had picked to Sun, nor did she dare to talk to him. She felt a chill emanating from Sun's whole body. Yu Xiaolian chewed on some bitter vegetable dumplings in her mouth and occasionally picked up a bowl to take a sip of soup, which flowed smoothly downwards. To be honest, this thing is not very delicious, she was eating it with a loud voice. Yu Changhe put a piece of pig oil residue into Yu Xiaolian's bowl and said, "Eating this is so delicious." Seeing Yu Changhe looking forward, Yu Xiaolian didn't refuse Yu's kindness and put the pig oil residue in her mouth. "It's so fragrant." Yu Changhe smiled and pushed the pig oil residue in front of Yu Xiaolian, "Eat more." Yu Xiaolian glanced at Sun's icy aura and didn't dare to eat too much pig oil residue. She ate a vegetable dumpling, but drank 2 bowls of wild vegetable soup. There was no way, without the soup, she couldn't swallow it at all. After dinner, Sun took out those embroidered handkerchiefs and things for making sachets. Upon seeing this, Yu Changhe spoke up and said, "It's already dark. Let's do it tomorrow. It's tiring to do this tonight. You go boil some water, and we'll wipe our bodies later," Sun said without stopping, thinking that Yu Xiaolian had fallen into the pit, covered in dirt all over, and indeed needed to be washed. Yu Changhe responded and walked out. Sun once again emptied out the things that were used to make bamboo dumplings and sat in the kong near the window, where there was still a faint light. Sun didn't even ask Yu Xiaolian to help her. After sitting down, she silently started moving her hand. After Sun had finished one, Yu Xiaolian held it in her hand and looked at it. It was then that she understood that what Sun had made was something similar to a Chinese knot, with a gap in the middle that could be adjusted in size, probably to match different jade pendants. Yu Xiaolian can also do this thing, but she doesn't do it as well as Sun sure. Thinking that Sun was too slow to do it alone, Yu Xiaolian was about to reach out for the colorful rope when Sun stopped her and said, "You haven't washed your hands, don't touch them." Yu Xiaolian blushed suddenly. She had just finished her meal and her hands were not dirty either. During the day, Sun sure still treated her with a kind and amiable demeanor, but at night, she seemed like a different person. Yu Xiaolian went to scoop water and wash her hands again, and then went to get those colorful ropes. Sun remained silent. Only after they had been weaving for a while, the sky was pitch black. Yu Changhe brought the bathtub into the house, adjusted the water temperature, and smiled, "Don't do it, you 2 women, take a shower." Speaking, Yu Changhe walked up to the oil lamp and lit it up. Sun frowned and said, "Don't light the lights, you can see the washing." Yu Changhe smiled and said, "Turn on the bright spot. You 2, wash quickly, and I'll keep an eye on you at the door." Sun happened to finish one in her hand and carefully put it away, saying to Yu Xiaolian, "You go wash it first, I'll find you clothes to change." As she spoke, Sun opened the small door of the Kong cabinet and pulled out a set of washed white clothes, handing them to Yu Xiaolian. Yu Xiaolian took it over, but it didn't go into the bathtub for a long time. Sun sure looked at her in surprise and seemed to understand Yu Xiaolian's thoughts. He closed the door and went out. Yu Xiaolian took a hot bath in pain and pleasure. If she didn't take it, she would be startled. There were too many cracks on her body, and she washed a bucket of water like mud and soup. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Opportunities for Wealthy Money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Opportunities for Wealthy Money. The next morning, after having breakfast, Xiaolian avoided Xiaojiang and Sun Shi and secretly put on black beautiful pupils for herself. She then took the clothes she had changed from yesterday and went to the riverbank. Fortunately, in the past, everyone in the village avoided her, and apart from the Yu family, no one had carefully looked into her eyes. She knew in her heart that Xiaolian must be waiting for her at the foot of the mountain at this moment, but she just didn't want to go. Thinking of Xiaolian's appearance yesterday made her furious. He dug a pit and she fell in. He brought her out, isn't it natural? Why should she repay him? Perhaps due to the cold river water in the early morning, there is no one by the river now, only Xiaolian is washing clothes. Xiaolian has been wearing it for several days and has not really seen what the original owner looks like. Out of curiosity, she looked at the river water. Well, with proper facial features, big eyes, cherry small mouth, and a delicate nose, it's just a bit black and thin. Xiaolian is quite satisfied with the appearance of this body. If the original owner was not good looking, Junmabai probably wouldn't take her as a concubine. Later on, he also favored her. Although there was a reason for being threatened by the original owner, considering that the original owner was ugly, Junmabai probably wouldn't go down with it. Xiaolian couldn't get used to the pounding pestle used by the Sun family. Her clothes were rubbed little by little with her hands. Although the river was a bit cold, fortunately it was still summer and she could still bear it. After washing her clothes, Xiaolian picked up a wooden basin and planned to go home. Halfway through, she saw Xiaolian holding her arms and leaning against a tree in front of her. It seemed that she was undoubtedly waiting for her. Just as Xiaolian was about to turn a blind eye, Xiaolian suddenly spoke up and said, "Is that how you repay your life-saving benefactor? You truly deserve to be the little nemesis of hard life. You are truly ruthless and cold-blooded." Xiaolian stopped and turned around. "Even if you didn't come yesterday, I could still go out by myself. It was just a matter of putting in some effort, losing my life wouldn't be enough." Xiaolian approached Xiaolian and said, "So, you're not going to admit what you promised me yesterday today? Even though it was my father who asked you to find me, even if you want affection, you should also find him." "Oh, it's because of this," Xiaolian rubbed his chin and smiled. "If I say you won't regret going out with me today, will you go or not?" Xiaolian raised her eyebrows and said, "My life is cheap, good things won't come to me. As far as I know, your family's current situation is that spending winter this year is a problem. Are you sure you won't come? This may be an opportunity to make a fortune." Upon hearing what Xiaolian said, Xiaolian carefully examined this person. Xiaolian looks only 17 or 18 years old, tall and average in appearance, with messy hair like a chicken coop, giving off a dirty and flowing feeling. Looking at him again, there was a long hemp rope wrapped around his waist, and he was wearing a short coat without sleeves, revealing 2 thick arms. The coat was also patched with large patches, no better than Xiaolian's clothes. "Why did you come to me when there's a good thing about getting rich?" Xiaolian naturally didn't believe the news of pie falling from the sky. Xiaolian glanced around and saw no one around before approaching Xiaolian's ear and whispering softly. Upon hearing Xiaolian's words, Xiaolian's eyes lit up and she excitedly said, "Wait for me, I'll take the clothes home and come." As soon as Xiaolian entered the yard, she couldn't wait to hang her clothes. Just as she was about to leave, she ran away and hurriedly took yesterday's basket and a small wooden knife for digging wild vegetables. The things in the basket have disappeared, and it seems that they have been taken by Sun to marinate. Xiaolian didn't see the figure of Sun, so she had to ask Xiaojiang, who was weaving baskets with willow branches in the corner of the yard, "Dad, where is my mother?" The willow wicker baskets woven by Xiaojiang are both sturdy and beautiful, but each basket can only sell for about 5 or 6 won. This morning, Xiaojiang woke up at dawn and has already woven 3 baskets. Thinking that he will receive 15 won soon, Xiaojiang was in a good mood. When Xiaolian asked him, he smiled and said, "Your mother went to the Zhao family to do embroidery work." Seeing Xiaolian carrying a basket, he asked again, "Are you going up the mountain again to dig wild vegetables?" Xiaolian nodded. "Are those dug yesterday already pickled?" "I'll go and dig more today, and let my mother pickle more. If I drink congee in winter, there will be no food left." Xiaojiang smiled and instructed, "Go ahead, remember not to go east, come back early." Xiaolian responded one by one and left the courtyard of the Yu family. She ran towards the foot of the mountain, carrying a basket and having fun. Jianglin was still wrapped in a long hemp rope around his waist, spinning his curved knife in a bored manner. When he saw Xiaolian carrying a basket out, he knew she had come out in the name of digging wild vegetables. He didn't talk anymore and took Xiaolian's basket and held it in his hand. Jianglin walked ahead, while Xiaolian closely followed behind. Occasionally, in areas with dense vegetation, Jianglin would use a curved knife to randomly chop a few times, so as not to get his clothes wet by the morning dew. After walking for over half an hour, Xiaolian couldn't help but ask, "How far is there?" Jianglin kept walking and said, "What's wrong? Are you tired?" "A little bit," Xiaolian nodded. After all, after walking such a long mountain road, it is rugged and uneven, and the tall wild grass often touches the feet, making walking more tiring than usual. Xiaolian pointed to a chopped tree stump and said, "Sit and rest for a while before leaving, right?" Just as Xiaolian was about to walk over and sit down, Jianglin lifted her arm and pulled her up. "This is Grandpa Mountain God's dining table, you can't sit," she said. Xiaolian's tired legs are weak, and she doesn't care about the dining table of Grandpa Mountain God. She just wants to find a place to sit for a while and rest. "You're so superstitious at a young age. Don't you believe that Grandpa Mountain God really exists?" Jianglin looked shocked. Like him and his father, who make a living by hunting and rely on the mountains for food, there is no doubt in their hearts about the existence of mountain gods. Xiaolian wanted to just open her mouth and say, "I don't believe it." But thinking of being inexplicably called the wrong soul, he swallowed the words back. "If you don't sit, then don't sit. I'll just sit on the ground." Xiaolian sat down on the grass. Fortunately there was no more dew on the grass by now. "How much further is it?" "It's almost over this mountain." Jianglin also sat on the grass next to Xiaolian. "Are you not afraid that I'm lying to you?" "I'm a little nemesis, you're not afraid of bad luck." "What am I afraid of?" "That's right, I didn't expect you to be quite brave. I told my dad many times, but he didn't allow me to come. As soon as I told you, you came." Xiaolian casually picked up a handful of wild grass next to him and said, "I've agreed, if there's really something good inside, we'll split it up." Jianglin patted her chest and said, "Don't worry, there must be something good inside." Xiaolian was half believing and half doubting Jianglin's words. If there is really something good, why is Hunter Jiang so taboo about it? Taboos are not taboo, they have already walked half the way now, and there is no room for her to backtrack. No matter how hard she has to go and see. Jianglin suddenly took out an oil paper packet from his arms and handed it to Xiaolian, "Here." Xiaolian opened it and saw a large yellow chicken leg. Unconsciously, she swallowed a mouthful of water and said, "Did you bring it specifically for me?" Jianglin shook his head and said, "I brought it for myself." "So why did you give it to me?" Jianglin turned his head to avoid the scrutinizing gaze of Xiaolian and said, "Here you are, you can eat it. Why do you have so much nonsense?" End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Tomb of Grass Ghost Grandma. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 The Tomb of Grass Ghost. Grandma, since Xiaolian came here, she hasn't eaten any meat yet. Yesterday, she only took a small bite of pig fat residue. At this moment, a fragrant chicken leg was placed in her hand. Does she have any reason to refuse? No. Xiaolian took the chicken leg and took a fierce bite. Fragrant, so fragrant. Even without any seasoning, this chicken leg is very fragrant, and wild chickens are even more delicious than feed chickens. Xiaolian saw Xiaolian wolfing down the chicken legs and a smile curved his lips. If you're craving meat in the future, come to my house and find me. We don't have anything else at home. We'll take care of the game. Xiaolian threw away the chicken bones, stood up from the ground, patted the grass on her buttocks, and said, "The villagers are all afraid of me, so you're not afraid." Xiaolian also stood up, shaking Xiaolian's basket in his hand and walking ahead. "Ha! What are you? I'm not even afraid of Grass Ghost Grandma's tomb, I can still be afraid of you, little girl." Xiaolian smiled and said that Xiaolian was superstitious. He was not afraid of the Grass Ghost lady. He said he was not superstitious, and he still believed in the mountain god. Xiaolian and Xiaolian walked for about an hour before arriving at the tomb of the Grass Ghost lady that Xiaolian had mentioned. Fortunately, the journey was relatively safe and there were no large wild animals encountered. Wild rabbits and squirrels saw quite a few. Xiaolian had heard his father say before that there was a large tomb on this second hill. The owner of the tomb was a grass ghost woman who was skilled in gushu. This grass ghost woman was a person with both wealth and power during her lifetime. Xiaolian has been thinking about this tomb for a long time. It was not until a while ago that he finally found the location of the tomb. However, he had to work hard to carve out a small gap under the stone door of the tomb. Xiaolian was tall and strong, so he couldn't enter, but he couldn't wait to know if there was really anything valuable in the tomb. That's why he found Xiaolian, who was petite and skinny. Xiaolian pointed to a hole in the lower right corner of the stone gate and said to Xiaolian, "You can climb in and take a look. If there is really something inside, it's not worth my effort. Don't worry, I've smoked it with mugwort several times already. Even if that grass ghost woman left some poisonous insects or something, I would have smoked it to death long ago." Xiaolian lay on the ground, looking into the gap, but inside it was pitch black and couldn't see anything clearly. Xiaolian said again, "It's too difficult to chisel this stone gate, otherwise I wouldn't have asked you to share this soup. Do you dare to go in?" Xiaolian had read the tomb raiding notes in her past life and was deeply attracted by the plot inside. At this time, although she was also a bit uneasy, she was more excited about the unknown things. Xiaolian took out a candle from his arms and handed it to Xiaolian, saying, "I even prepared a candle specifically for you. You can come out and take a look inside, dare you?" Xiaolian glanced at the candle in Xiaolian's hand and didn't reach out to pick it up. She pulled away the unburned mugwort from the crevice of the stone door and silently crawled in. In just the blink of an eye, Xiaolian's lower leg was exposed outside, and Xiaolian hurriedly said, "Hey! Don't you take the candle. If you don't take the candle, then you won't see anything inside." Xiaolian handed the candle in through the crack and threw the flame in. Xiaolian saw Xiaolian pick up the candle and shouted, "It's black inside, be careful." As soon as Xiaolian entered the tomb, she felt waves of coldness emanating from the depths of the tomb. Xiaolian took root under her feet and didn't dare to move around, causing a hint of timidity in her heart. But thinking that she had also died once, and that she had worked in forensic medicine in her past life, she could not be discouraged at this time. Xiaolian encouraged herself in her heart and quickly gathered the courage to walk in. She didn't light a candle, but took out a flashlight from the space, which was much brighter than a candle. Xiaolian shook her flashlight around. Rather than being a tomb, it was more like a natural cave, but the tomb owner used this natural cave to rest here. There was an iron gate in front of Xiaolian, but there was a large gap in the iron railing. Yu Xiaolian effortlessly crawled in. After patting the rust on her body, Yu Xiaolian continued to walk towards the depths of the cave. The deeper you go, the cooler and more piercing it becomes. The gentle footsteps all have long echoes, making people feel scalp tingling. Suddenly, Yu Xiaolian's flashlight shone on a pile of bottles and cans. She paused for a moment and didn't dare to go over to check. After all, Jiang Lin said that the owner of this tomb is a grass ghost woman who is very good at raising gubu. If all these bottles and jars are filled with gubu, then her life would be ruined. Yu Xiaolian didn't move those things and continued on. After turning a fork, a large iron door appeared again in front of her. There was a rusty lock hanging on the iron door, which was neat and flat without any indentations. It was obvious that it was very thick. Inside the iron gate, it should be the coffin of that grass ghost woman, right? Yu Xiaolian tried to pull on the rusty lock, but the iron door remained motionless. Seeing that it could not be opened, she decided to go back the same way. Walking back to the pile of bottles and jars, Yu Xiaolian casually touched a small white porcelain bottle. She always came back once and couldn't go back empty-handed. She was actually quite curious about what was inside. As she approached the stone gate, Yu Xiaolian heard Jiang Lin's restless call. She quickly responded, "I'm back, you step aside, I'll crawl out." As soon as Yu Xiaolian entered, Jiang Lin felt a bit regretful, afraid that something unexpected might happen to Yu Xiaolian, causing her heart to hang in suspense. When Yu Xiaolian crawled out of the hole and a ray of sunlight shone on her, she felt a sigh of relief. Alas, she is really not suitable for this anxious activity. How about it? Is there any treasure inside? Jiang Lin pulled Yu Xiaolian's arm and asked anxiously. Yu Xiaolian shook her head and said, "There is a big iron gate inside. With our abilities, we definitely can't open it." Upon hearing this, Jiang Lin's head drooped and he said, "So we're here for nothing." Yu Xiaolian handed the white porcelain vase he was holding to Jiang Lin. "It's not for nothing. I picked up this one." Jiang Lin immediately excitedly took the porcelain bottle and looked left and right for a while. Just as he was about to pull out the bottle stopper and take a closer look, he was held down by Yu Xiaolian. "Be careful, what if there are goo insects inside?" Yu Xiaolian's words almost caused Jiang Lin to accidentally break the porcelain vase, but fortunately, he was agile and able to firmly grasp it. "What you said also makes sense." Jiang Lin still looked at the porcelain bottle that didn't blink, but didn't dare to easily open the bottle stopper. Suddenly, Jiang Lin shouted, "Look, there are words at the bottom of this bottle." Jiang Lin has never attended school since childhood and only knows a few simple characters, but he still knows the characters at the bottom of the porcelain vase. Changxinggu. Jiang Lin was surprised. Is this the tomb of the saint who betrayed the witch tribe? Yu Xiaolian frowned. In the novel, she had no interaction with Jiang Lin, but she had heard of this witch saint. Because Yu Xiaolian's biological mother is the saint of the witch tribe. But when Jiang Lin died and said that she had betrayed the witch tribe, it was obvious that she was not referring to her own mother. How did Jiang Lin know about the witch saint? Yu Xiaolian asked calmly, "What is the eternal goo? Who is the witch saint? She sounds very powerful." End of this chapter.